Hello, this is Outlaw Bookseller. Today we're going to look at the work of a small press publisher who existed between 1987 and 1991, though I do believe they did one chapbook after that, and that's Morrigan. Morrigan were the sole enterprise of a friend of mine called Les Escott, who I met in 1986 in the Ham bookshop which I was managing at the time. And I'll talk to you about Morrigan as we go along. This was the first book they issued in 1987, and this is Death Arms by K.W. Jeter. Very plain rear, as you see. And Death Arms is interesting is in that it was the third of a trilogy. And I'm just looking, Les has inscribed all of these for me, and he says, "My first venture into solo publishing, little did I know." So there's a unique inscription in this copy. Now, this was Les's first book, and it's fairly typical of the way that publishers and booksellers approach bookselling then, because there's a quirkiness about this, in that this is the third in a trilogy. Now, as it tells you here, this first edition is limited to 1,010 copies. 260 have an additional article by the author bound in. Of these, 10 are bound in leather, are signed and lettered, and are for private distribution. 250 are specially bound and signed and numbered. So this is not one of the specially bound in leather, as you can see. If you want a copy, there's a complete set of Morrigan leather bound editions, all 10 books, on sale at Hyraxia online at the moment, and they're going for £4,000. Remember, there are only 10 of each of these in the world, and in most cases they are world first hardcovers, and they represent the ultimate state. So this is typical of the way that limited editions were done then. 1,010 copies, 10 for private distribution, 250 signed and numbered with an extra bit of material, and about 750 then for the trade. This is a trade edition, and the interesting thing about this is that this is a signed trade edition, so these are actually uncommon. This may well be more uncommon than the signed numbered version of 250. So there we go. So how did I get this? Well, I was at the WorldCon in '87, and I knew Les, as I say, and he just published his first books, and I was wandering around what the Americans call the huckster's room and what we in the UK call the dealer's room, and basically he said, "Will you watch my stand for a while? I need to nip off." And I was there for an hour. I can't remember selling any books, but as a result he gave me this copy of Death Arms, which was really, really nice of him. And I was very, very keen to have it, because Death Arms is the third in the trilogy by K.W. Jeter. As I say, the first two books in the trilogy, Dr. Adder and The Glass Hammer, had been published by Grafton, one of my favourite publishers, so this was the third, and Les then sold the rights to this book to Grafton for the paperback edition, because he knew Jeter really well. Jeter had actually lived at his house in Bath for a while in the early to mid-80s, and the fact is this, is that the word steampunk was coined by K.W. Jeter at my friend Les's house in Bath. I'll tell you more about that another time. Moving on, somebody that Les also published at this time, in 1987, is R.A. Lafferty. Now, R.A. Lafferty is quite an obscure author still, and a very, very unusual one, but he is somebody whose critical cache actually seems to be growing. There's a best of R.A. Lafferty from Golax Masterworks, and there's people like Neil Gaiman making comments about it and what have you, and I'm actually selling it quite regularly in my regular job in bookselling at the moment. So this is an unusual Lafferty. I'm not sure if there's ever been a paperback of this. So again, this is an example of standard trade edition. There we go. Oh, I tell a lie. This is actually not, it's one of the 260 with a previously unpublished story entitled Grey Ghost bound in. 10 of those are bound in leather. The other 250 include this one, regular sort of boards binding, and signed and numbered by R.A. Lafferty, and it's also signed by Les Escott, my friend the publisher. So that makes it quite uncommon, because Les hasn't actually signed many books. I quite like getting publishers to sign books where I can as well when I've met them, because, you know, it's something to look back and remember, and I say Les has been my friend for a long time. So that's that one there. So that was '87. As I say, there was a bit of a boom in small publishing then, and I used to stock these books at the bookshop I was working at. And we wouldn't sell loads, but we would sell 3 or 4, which was great because they were for the corner shanty. In 1988, Les moved forward with a number of books, and I'll show you another Lafferty he did at that time. So I'm just going to move things around a little bit here just to grab that. And this is East of Laughter by R.A. Lafferty. And all you can see is a mauve box. Now, of course, as any collector will tell you, that box is called a slipcase. And in line with what Kerosena and other small press publishers are doing at that time, Les decided to start putting the books in their limited editions in slipcases. So if you got one of the 250 limited edition copies, they came in a slipcase. So I'll just pop this out of here and look at that. And you've got a very handsome dust jacket side by side with the slipcase. And I'll just turn it over for you because you can see the rear. There we go. All very nice. So again, this represents the limited edition state, and as I say, by now, Les had gone for slipcases. This one's also cloth bound, same cloth obviously as the slipcase. Cloth bound is really beautiful, of course, and as I say, inside we have, it's signed by R.A. Lafferty. It has an extra article by Gene Wolfe. It's numbered, and again, it's also signed by Les Escott. So that's about as good as it can get with a copy of the limited state. So that was something that Les did in '88. And I only acquired the Laffertys from him recently. He actually gave them to me because we've been friends a long time. I was very, very kind. I wanted to get my Morrigan collection complete. Moving on to something else he gave me, this slipcase set here, which is in a brown faux leatherette, is an interesting one because it spans several years. Now, 2 of the books in this set were published in 1988, and those 2 books were The Digging Leviathan and Homunculus by James P. Blaylock. The 3rd book in this set, The Magic Spectacles by James P. Blaylock, so it's a Blaylock trilogy, if you were, even though the books are not related in that way, came out at 2 different times. The first 2, 87, The Magic Spectacles came out in 91. Les stuck to his usual thing of doing 1,010 copies, 10 in leather, 250 special edition with signatures and what have you, and 750 in trade. And he did have some left over. These things are not always immediate commercial successes. Sometimes they sell out, sometimes they don't. The main point is that you have to go out and sell them and connect with the fan base and what have you. And of course that was much, much, much harder in the days before the internet. So what he did some years ago was take the remaining copies, get these slipcases made, and created a limitation of 50 copies of each of the books into 50 slipcases, and we'll come back to that. So these are the books out of the slipcase. So these are issued individually, as I say. Digging Leviathan, which is a really great, fun book about aquariums and how can I put it, subterranean worlds, California, tropical fish, all sorts of weirdness. They're very, very strange, but they are really quite charming and unique. And as you see, beautiful jacket there, and illustrations by Ferret, who is a friend of Les's, who is a popular science fiction and fantasy illustrator who illustrated many of Morrigan's works. And again, Les has inscribed and signed this to me, Blaylock's finest novel, perfectly something, with a Tim Ferret illustration, a pleasure to publish. So there we go. Oops, there's a little bookmark in there for my book, 100 Must Read Science Fiction Novels, which is signed, bizarrely. And I think that's because I included The Digging Leviathan in 100 Must Read Science Fiction Novels. So there it is. So that was the first one. Lovely back jacket there. The next one was an important book for Les, again, because Homunculus by James Blaylock, a key steampunk novel, I guess you could say, is an important book because it won the Philip K. Dick Memorial Award that year. Now, the Philip K. Dick Memorial Award is for paperback originals. So this was a paperback original in the USA, So Les then got the rights from Blaylock to do a world first hardcover. So this was the world first hardcover. So I'm just going to backtrack a minute, have a quick look at the binding on. Yeah, and that's just plain there, because that's a standard edition, that one actually. So I think these are all standard editions rather than the limited. But putting them into this slipcase years later created a new limitation, which is an interesting way of selling off your unsold stock. So lovely decorated end papers, plain boards, and again, first hardcover of the PKD award-winning novel, signed by Les. There you go. So again, and another others in there. So there we are. It's got an introduction by Keith Roberts, great English science fiction writer. So that was a good one, because that really put Escott and Morrigan Books on the world stage, because to say this was the first hardcover of an award-winning book. The Philip K. Dick Memorial Award was really important then, because Dick had only been dead about 7 or 8 years, and it was the thing to win, because William Gibson had won the Hugo, the Nebula, and the Philip K. Dick Memorial Award, because Neuromancer, the true first edition, is a little paperback from Ace. So that was an important one. So to win the PKD award was a really big thing. So that was great for Blaylock, and it's a really great fun book. It begins with a skeleton flying over Victorian London in an airship. So there you go. And it goes on from there. Again, lovely illustration by Ferret on the back. Nice decorated end paper. It's great fun. So jumping forward from 88 to 91, Les then did probably what for me is his most idiosyncratic book, Blaylock's children's book, The Magic Spectacles, which is very, very strange indeed. This is the only edition there's ever been. And I'm hoping you can see on the new HD camera that this is a really beautiful sheen on the jacket. Lovely yellow, orange, red, and a beautiful piece there on the back again by Ferret. And this is very, very odd book indeed. If you can imagine Ray Bradbury on drugs eating a vat of ice cream, and it probably gives you an idea of what it's like. Very, very unsettling. Lewis Carroll, maybe I would say, would be an influence. Beautiful end papers again. And let's see. I think the reason I put these bookmarks in is because if when I go, if my collection's worth anything, that'll have association of value. First and only edition of the wonderful children's book, signed by Les Escott. There we go. So there we are, illustrations by Ferret, Morrigan, 1991. So that was a great thing that he did. Now, I'd already bought all these books as they came out from Les, but he actually gifted me this slipcase a while, which was really nice. And interesting, there's a little insert here that comes only in the slipcase. So there's only 50 of these, and it's a word about the author by William Ashbless. Now, William Ashbless is a non-existent fictional writer who was created by Blaylock, Powers, and their circle of California dreamers, who pretty much invented what the true original steampunk. And there's a little bit about Ashbless, whoever he isn't. It's signed by him, sure actually signature it is, but I think it's Tim Powers. It's James Blaylock, Ferret. Les has signed it as well. It's numbered 46 of 50. I'm pretty sure that's Tim Powers, but I can't be certain about that, so I'm not going to commit. So as I said, they all come in this rather nice case, which I'm putting back in, and there are only 50 of these. Mine is the only one which bears signatures by and dedications by Les Escott. It's also the only one that has that little insert signed by Les, so this is completely unique. The value, I'm not certain. Obviously the collector's market for these unusual books is relatively small, but in my experience, the smaller a collector's market, the more serious the reader, the more rabid they are. So that's a really beautiful collection, and I must thank Les again from the bottom of my heart for giving me one of the jewels in the crown in my collection of limiteds. Absolutely beautiful. Thanks a lot again, mate. I do hope we keep seeing each other when we move now. So that's some of the initial tranche of books by Morrigan. I'm going to move forward now. So we were in 1988. It's in 1989, and in 1989 things took a horrific turn. Morrigan did 2 books in 89. This is the first of them. Lovely blue cloth slipcase, as you can see. I'll just get that adjusted. Sorry if any of this is off centre. I'm just getting used to using this setup. This is a marvellous, marvellous book by one of my favourite writers, Keith Roberts. Blue cloth slipcase. I'm just going to slide the book out here. And this is Winterwood and Other Hauntings by Keith Roberts. And there's Keith in a little lamp up there, just there, a London alleyway, and this is, as it suggests, a collection of ghost and horror stories. So let's just have a look. Beautiful blue cloth binding, because this is the special edition, which, as you can see here, retailed for £40. So there are 250 of these, 10 leather bound, private distribution, and £13.95 for the 750 copies of the trade. I sold some of these in the shop I was working at the time. And as with all my Morrigan books, I got Les to fill an inscription. And he says, "That's Keith in the light, that is. In the words of the great man himself, F off." This refers back to a joke where, because Keith was a difficult man, so everybody says, towards the end of his life, he couldn't get deals with real publishers, with trade publishers I should say. He had to go to small presses, and even though the small presses treated him really well, he was a very, very difficult man. He was never really satisfied with production qualities, illustrations, things like that, and he would fall out with everybody. So he went through 3 or 4 different small presses. So we went from Kerosene to Morrigan to Solaris. I think only did one book. There are various publishers called Solaris. There is another publisher called Morrigan long after this, nothing to do with SF. And basically, Les and another friend of mine, Ben Staveley-Taylor, who I haven't seen for an extremely long time, they both worked at Kerosene together, joked that they should have a club which with a badge, and the badge would read, "I've been told to F off by Keith Roberts." And and quite honestly, if there'd ever been such a badge, I really wanted one, and I wanted that honour of being told to F off by one of the greatest SF writers we've ever had in this country. Sadly, I never met Keith, so it never happened. But there you go. But anyway, this is a fantastic book of short stories, and this is of particular interest to Stephen King fans, and I'm going to tell you why in a moment. You see, it's signed there by Keith Roberts, also by Robert Holdstock, who did the introduction. And Robert Holdstock, author of the wonderful World Fantasy Award-winning Mythaga Wood, died sadly young. Met him a few times, really nice guy. Him and Keith were chummy. And I mentioned Stephen King, and the interesting thing is that there's a story in here called The Scarlet Lady, which is about a red car which passes through several owners. And you'll remember that the car in Christine by Stephen King is red. Christine is red. The Scarlet Lady was published in a magazine, I think it was in SF Impulse in the 60s, so it predates Christine by a very long time, by about 10-15 years at least. And the car is effectively murderous, but it kills people in subtler ways than the car in Christine. So my view is, there's a possibility that King might have read this story and been influenced by it. So The Scarlet Lady, well worth reading. All the stories in this are fantastic. Scarlet Lady is particularly good, so well worth having a look at. This has reminded me actually that Morrigan also published a few chapbooks, small books with stapled wraps, no spines, and they did one to accompany this called The Event. And occasionally what would happen is that these bonus stories and chapbooks of the limited editions were bound in, and there it is, it's bound in there. You don't get that in the trade edition, only in the standard. But The Event was published as a chapbook, about 250 copies, and I'll show you that when I do a little feature on chapbooks. So, they're really good at getting these different variations of a book out. So you'd have leather bound, special with extra material, trade edition, you'd have the extra material in a little chapbook. So there'd be 4 variants. So if you're a serious collector, you want the lot. Of course, you have to be pretty loaded to do that, and at the time I couldn't afford it all. Wish I had. Wish I'd been on the private distribution list. Of course, most of those went to family and friends, so you've got to be realistic about these things. So also in '89, Les published another book by Kieran Mujita, his good friend, and this was his horror novel, In the Land of the Dead. Now I bought this one, not at the time, even though I was selling it at the time. This is at the Limited, and it's signed, and interestingly it says presentation copy. So this is one which was given away. So it's signed by Jeter, by the other contributors. Who are they? Let me just check. Charles DeLint and Ramsey Campbell contributed extra material. There's wonderful illustrations in here, and I've got a feeling I don't actually have this one signed by Les, which is a real that's an omission. I must get that sorted. So when I see him, I must. And what I'd say about Jeter is, even though he's a brilliant science fiction writer, the general critical consensus is that what he's really good at is writing horror novels. This actually has some sun fading. I think I bought this from Andy Richards of Cold Tonnage Books, who I've been buying from for over 30 years. Hi Andy, great dealer, good prices, never let you down, absolutely solid man. And as I say, Jeter's horror novels are absolutely sublime. They are abrasive, stark, pitiless, they show no mercy, and they really are extremely well written. These are works of literature. And I think as a horror writer, I would possibly say that Jeter is arguably my favourite horror writer, maybe the best horror writer I've ever read, and that's saying something. I don't mean that in a classic sense. I mean people like Poe, Machen, Richard Matheson are always going to be ahead of him because they were pioneers. But in terms of literary quality of a modern writer, I think Lafferty's the man. So that was a great year for Morrigan. They did 2 pretty scary books there, which was grand. So we're moving on now towards the close of this video, and in 1990 Les took on a real challenge and issued the first and only book by an American Indian, I guess you could say cyberpunk writer. This is Red Spider White Web by Misha. There has been a paperback of this. I think he sold the rights to Grafton, I seem to remember. I think there's a US paperback. This is the world's first hardcover. I don't think Misha ever published any other books, and she remains an obscure figure to this day, and this is quite bleak and stark. Les does like it bleak and stark. He's got very broad taste, likes all sorts of things. But again, absolutely beautiful. There's boards on this one, and let's see. Again, I don't think I ever got around. I thought I'd get Les to sort of write in all of these, but I obviously never got around to that. So when I see him again, I must get him to sort that out. So that's that one. So that's an interesting one to watch out for. The 80s was a great time in SF. I mean, I'm not so sure I thought that at the time, but it was really amazing, particularly in America. The early 80s was great for Britain, and there was some good stuff in the late 80s. But by the mid to late 80s, the US was absolutely astonishing. There were fantastic writers, people like Jeter, Gibson, Sterling, Lewis Shiner, Greg Bear, Pat Cadigan. You know, a lot of these people come out of the cyberpunk school, and it was just really great stuff out there. You know, absolutely wonderful. Even the sort of tackier stuff was really good. So the 80s was a real flowering of American SF, which had real aptitude. It combined new wave with hard SF. It stripped things down. You notice these books are mostly quite slim, which is, you know, the economy and taut, sharp writing that you get in a good novel. So that was 1990. So we were on the cusp there. Stunning jacket design, that. And then also moving forward into 91, by that time things were pretty much up for Morrigan, and the only book they did in 91 was the Blaylock book, Magic Spectacles, which is the red one, the children's one, which was a tough sell, I must say. So I've left my favourite Morrigan book, I say favourite in terms of the way it looks aesthetically, to last. And this is something that they did in 89. And I'm just going to show you the slipcase first. It's a nice green cloth slipcase. And, oops, as I say, still getting used to this, bear with me. How cack-handed can you get? And this is Alligator Alley by Dr. Adder and Mink Mole. As you will see, this slipcase not only has a book in it, it has a cassette of music. So I'm just going to slide that out. So what is Alligator Alley? Who are Dr. Adder and Mink Mole? Well, I'm not going to tell you, you're going to have to look for yourselves. But Dr. Adder is the title of one of K.W. Jeter's novels, his first novel. Not the first novel that was published by him, but the first one he completed, as I understand it. And this is a kind of science fiction parody of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas by Hunter S. Thompson. If you don't know Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, I will stick a picture on this video. It's from one of the great sort of novels from the hippie era. Hunter S. Thompson, a journalist who took an awful lot of drugs, was pretty much a bad boy, wrote really well. And Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas is pretty much essential reading for everybody born between about, well, let's say anybody who was young between the time, say, 1967 and 1990. It's still around now, it still sells now, it's not as famous as it was. So this was like a science fiction parody bed. And who are the authors? Well, Dr. Ada suggests K.W. Jeter. Mink Mole, who can say? Names like Ferret, K.W. Jeter, Tim Powers, James Blaylock are bandied about. Nice end papers. I'm going to let you find out for yourself. So that's part of the fun. Signed by Mink Mole and Ferret. Ooh. And Dr. Ada. Beautiful frontispiece there. Copy number 79. Limited edition of 210 copies. So this was a true limited. There wasn't a trade for this one. 10 leather bound, 200 copies. So this is a pretty scarce book. So there's only been 210 copies of this. Never been paid for that. Very, very unusual book. Very much an insider fan book. And as I said, we just get the cassette out of the slipcase. It hasn't been out there for many, many years. There's the cassette. There's the slipcase. Let's see how this is lining up. So there you go. And it's got a soundtrack on it. Ada side. There we are. And it's got all sorts of tracks with musicians. I have played it. I can't recall a time. I must play it again, actually. I can't have been that impressed, but you know, it's great fun. Now, also to top this off, there was an extra. Now, I probably should have ironed this. And you're thinking, ironed it? What can he possibly mean? What book-related collectible needs ironing? Well, with this set came this T-shirt. Tour Alligator Alley, Smile Like a Reptile. Now, of course, Smile Like a Reptile is a David Bowie lyric from the Genie. So, and this is large. I have worn it, not for a while because I'm extra large these days. I have worn it to work even. And the slipcase come with these. And Les said to me that he did end up with a lot of these in his attic at one point. So if you ever see anybody wearing one of these, you know where it comes from, but you're not likely to. So there you go. Slipcase, hardcover book, cassette, T-shirt. What a package. So that's Morrigan Books for you. An interesting publisher, idiosyncratic, you know, great, great fun. When it was done for love as much as money. There are still great limited edition publishers working now. They seem to be more successful. They seem to be going on. We live in a different world. But if you go back to the great days of Kerosene, Morrigan, Drunken Dragon, Solaris, it was really done mostly out of love. Morrigan was the most original and groundbreaking of them all. And I was always honoured to work with Les and to go drinking with him, and we had great fun together. And he's got some great stories with SF. Hopefully he'll start his own channel one day and tell us more about it. So this is Outlaw Bookseller. I hope you've enjoyed this clip. As I say, it's an experiment. I don't know if it's actually turned out. I don't know if you can hear me. I don't know what it'll look like. If you do enjoy it, move over and have a quick look at my friend Jules Burt's site. And I aim to do more collection videos soon. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.